It is quite a fun occasion when a beloved classic movie franchise finally makes a return after a long hiatus, and though in many cases reboots and revivals can be disappointments that fail to capture the same creative lightning as their predecessors, you might just get lucky and end up with a fantastic new entry. So when I heard that they were making a new Evil Dead movie for the first time in 10 years, I was cautiously optimistic. I knew it could go in either one of two directions, but as information and trailers started releasing, I was totally convinced that Evil Dead Rise would be a huge winner. And well, let me tell you, I was so disappointed that... Actually, no, I'm just fucking with you, I really liked it. I am much more of a fan of the comedic Evil Dead movies, in particular Army of Darkness, so it might seem strange that this entirely serious new film appealed to me that much, but you have to understand that this series is a bizarre outlier for me. I normally adore serious horror movies and often prefer them to more lighthearted counterparts, but in the case of the Evil Dead franchise, I think you really just can't beat the charm and fun of those wacky, crazy, and creative Bruce Campbell escapades. But was Evil Dead Rise as good as I thought when I first watched it, or does it fall flat? See what I did there? The first thing you'll notice is the great opening shot, which makes use of the typical flying camera that this series is known for. It may seem like a requirement that's almost become played out at this point, but this movie turns it into a great twist where the camera turns out to be a drone. What ensues is a fantastic cold open with plenty of creepy moments, brutal and sudden assaults that I don't think I can even show on YouTube, and one of the best title reveals in history. So when we move on and start with the main plot, my blood is pumping and I'm ready to see some crazy shit go down. The thing is, though, that outside of the rainy, dark atmosphere and imposing imagery of the high-rise apartment setting, the first 20 or so minutes are devoid of much horror at all, and rather spend that time building up the main characters and setting the stage for what's to come next. Now, what's great is that this is actually a good thing by all measures, and I'm only surprised because I've gotten so used to more basic horror movies that jump right into action and let very little time to any sort of storytelling. We're introduced to the main characters, a single mother and her 3 kids, as well as her somewhat estranged sister who returns from Thailand for what other reason than to ask for help. However, this setup isn't simply thrown out there and then ignored, but rather we're given some compelling scenes where the tensions between the mom and her sister become the main focus. These 2 actresses absolutely kill it, and everything is going in this movie's favor during the first 15 to 20 minutes.
Hey Bridget, Mom's on nights and we're watching all the Freddy movies in a row.
Even the shitty ones.
There aren't any shitty ones.
However, we quickly run into our first major issue. The entire setup for the conflict of the movie. Now that might seem like a pretty huge critique for me to just throw out there, but hear me out. I'm not going to criticize the movie too much for having the son be dumb enough to play a recording of the Necronomicon, or, well, whatever new book it is this time around, because that's been the setup for most of these movies anyway, and it's kind of just become a typical cautionary tale of a character's dumb mistake at this point. What I will complain about, though, is how to even get to the point that he gets his grubby little hipster hands on it, an earthquake just so happens to happen right on the site of their apartment just weeks before it's set to be demolished, and just so happens to open up a passage to a hidden area below the parking garage where this kid just so happens to find the exact book and audio recordings to kick it all off in a whole area full of other boxes and artifacts. I'm sorry, but that's a ridiculous amount of convenience, and it didn't need to be this way. They specifically wrote this setup to be so complicated that it could have just been far simpler and would have made more sense as a result. Also, do you really expect me to believe that no emergency responders, or anyone for that matter, would show up to the apartment after a 5.5 magnitude earthquake? It's a shame because throughout the rest of the movie, things kick off brilliantly, but these 2 gargantuan plot holes make the end of the first act feel like a sloppy tool to jarringly push us from the character setup to the actual main plot and horror of the movie. And finally, is this scene with the neighbors jarringly edited and paced, or is it just me? I mean, multiple conversations are started here without any real purpose or satisfying end to them, and everything happens far too quickly to feel natural or sensible.
Let's roll.
Is that them?
Okay, but now that we've gotten all those negatives out of the way, the second act definitely makes up for a lot of these issues, thankfully. Things finally erupt 30 minutes in with the evil flying into an elevator with the mother and possessing her during a brutal, intense scene of the wires hanging and tying her up. In fact, if there's one thing this movie absolutely excels at, it's making great and creative scenes that get deep under my skin. And more examples of that keep coming in the first major horror sequence, where her possessed deadite form enters the apartment and starts throwing eggs into a pan engulfed in intense flames until they begin to bleed, which is truly revolting to me. How disgusting and depraved. Oh yeah, and then she vomits a bunch of white stuff and falls into it. Alright. In all seriousness, both are gross, and the vomit's probably way more gross, but if you're wondering why I'm so put off by the eggs, then clearly you've never experienced the kind of trauma I did when I was sitting next to someone who ate scrambled eggs with ketchup on top, and then another person said to them that they were eating an aborted chicken fetus. And that created such a horrible image in my mind that now whenever I see bleeding eggs, which I don't do very often, mind you, it just brings all that crap back and I can't handle it. But the horror just keeps getting crazier and more amazing with every minute in this film, as we're then treated to her flying out of the bathtub and screeching from its apex like a banshee, which is just an iconic shot, and then attacking her family members with various brutal weapons, such as glass shards and a tattoo needle, which is cleverly foreshadowed in the beginning. And I would praise the part where she bites a dude's eye out as well, because it's truly horrifying and shows that she's an absolute force to be reckoned with, but it's kinda let down by the following moment of her coughing it into another guy's mouth, which is just very abrupt, bizarre, and off-putting to me. Maybe it's an attempt at dark comedy, but since that doesn't exist in the rest of the movie, it comes off as just strange. I do love the cinematography in this movie, though. Even if it's not as spectacular as something like Evil Dead 2, for example, it manages to make such a small and familiar space like an apartment feel threatening and imposing, especially with the iconic set of shots from the door's eye hole. This shot creeps me the hell out, because I can imagine how terrified I'd be if I looked out my door and saw someone creepy standing there in the middle of the night. Hello, sir. Have you considered accepting the love and warm embrace of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ? Close call. Next time it might be the IRS, though. It's not all style and scares, though, because the main protagonist of the film is the mom's sister, Beth, who herself is actually pregnant, and throughout the course of the plot learns to take care of and protect her nieces and her nephew, although mainly just the youngest niece. She kinda sucks at dealing with the other two, considering they, die. But her sister's possessed self constantly berating her and shaming her lifestyle functions as a very clever juxtaposition with how she did the exact same before the possession, just in a more subtle way, thus telling a clever and impactful story of empowerment and overcoming the doubt and judgment in our surroundings. This message is especially important for young women like this character, and it's great to see such a significant amount of deeper meaning injected into the film's otherwise fully entertainment-oriented writing without overshadowing the fun or horror of the whole ordeal. And man, is that apparent, as there are so many countless examples of great horror scenes. I think it would be a disservice to simply go through all of them, but I'd like to highlight two in particular. First up is the part where Beth is listening to the record to try and find a solution with noise-canceling headphones, but we then see her possessed sister in the background climbing on the walls. Now, maybe it's just because it's very close to one of the creepiest shots in Hereditary, But either way, this moment always makes my skin crawl and works so well using a modern scenario to create an interesting bit of horror. And the other one is, well, the entire finale. It starts with all the dead neighbors and kids coming back as Deadites, reciting the iconic Dead by Dawn line, and then combining into a giant eldritch horror the likes of which the series has never seen? This thing is the Deadite equivalent of the Rat King from The Last of Us 2, and I absolutely love it. We're brought back to the parking lot, and the finale truly doesn't disappoint, bringing together more subtly intense moments as well as bombastic crowd pleasers that had me at the edge of my seat with a big smile. When she says, "Come get some," and then wields the chainsaw against the monster, it feels both like a great callback to the best of previous Evil Dead movies, but also like a new take on the franchise and a satisfying, self-contained ending for this movie. So I'd argue it uses fan service optimally. And the way it ends up being killed in a wood chipper is set up at the very start and is both disgusting and super fun, which is kind of indicative of the whole movie and, in many ways, the Evil Dead series as a whole. And then the movie ends with the girl from the cold open getting possessed, which I quite liked. It's cool for us to get some context and bring everything full circle, providing the connection between the main plot and the opener of the film. Overall, Evil Dead Rise is a very good horror movie with many things going for it, such as the amazing main performances, especially from Melissa Sutherland as the creepy possessed mom, great cinematography, and terrifying, memorable horror moments, though it is definitely damaged by some stupid plot details and a pretty underwhelming, overly complicated setup. I do wonder if this movie would have been better if it was just its own original horror movie not connected to the series, but then again, the Evil Dead related parts that are included are some of the best parts of the whole movie, so I think it works out fine enough. In the end, a very good but flawed 3.5 out of 5.